Dentist and lawyer and teacher probably had a giant freaky beard too, and so too did all of the big celebrities of the day, like Charles Darwin and Charles Dickens and Henry David Thoreau and Walt Whitman and Tchaikovsky and Brahms and Alexander Graham Bell and Frederick Engels and Theodore Herzl and Rasputin. Now, why exactly giant beards were so popular in the late 19th century is one of those historical things that people have a lot of different theories on. There's obviously not one single cause, but rather a big complex swirl of multiple cultural and sociological factors that were all swirling around at the time in a big complex swirling swirl. Now, when you look at pictures of world leaders from the early 19th century, what you see is that back then, a lot of upper-class men dressed in this very formal, fussy, uptight, and even kind of effeminate way, with fancy vests and scarves and stockings and all the rest. So there's a theory that says that the style of the late 19th century reflected a kind of growing exhaustion with all of that, and a desire for men to dress in a way that was more comfortable and natural. Doing things the natural way was quite a hot idea in the late 19th century in general, because that was a time of massive social change and a lot of growing anxiety about modernity and all of the factories and whatnot. So having a way to rebel against the contrived fussiness of modern life was very popular. A lot of Christians in that time even believed that not shaving was a way that you could show respect for the natural beauty of God's creation, which is still something that some religions believe to this day. Then you have other beard historians who say that the trend was at least partially inspired by envy for soldiers who obviously were not able to shave on the battlefield and thus would come back looking all rugged and hairy, which again associated the beard with this romantic idea of man in his natural state as this untamed warrior. As you can probably tell, there was a lot of gender stuff bound up in all of this as well. By not shaving, men were very visibly emphasizing their own masculinity, which was seen as an inherently good thing in the context of a broader social order in which men and women were expected to behave very differently and not have much to do with one another. Grooming was redefined as something that only women did, or maybe gay weirdos like Oscar Wilde. The truly manly man left his house without even glancing in the mirror. This being the Victorian age, there were of course also all of these quack theories about how the all-natural bearded look brought with it various health benefits. This included some absolutely lunatic stuff, like how having a long beard could help your teeth, or how it could help filter the air and protect your lungs from factory pollution. Let me read you a good anecdote from this book, Of Beards and Men, The Revealing History of Facial Hair by Christopher Oldstone Moore. American writers produced the most eccentric theories, namely that hair helped the body maintain its electrical balance. New discoveries about the properties of electricity and the human nervous system sparked speculation about the electrical properties of hair. One notion, proposed by a contributor to the American Phrenological Journal, was that the high conductivity of hair allowed it to collect valuable electrical force for use by the brain and nervous system. This explained why hairiness was commonly associated with mental power and brilliancy. Another writer, noting that hair is in fact an insulator, not a conductor of electricity, claimed that it helped keep the body's stores of electrical force from draining away into the air. Men who shaved lost electricity and thus vital energy. So anyway, with this sort of thing being the dominant sensibility of the time, it was no great surprise that all of the top politicians had big beards too. Rulers of nations from Canada to Colombia, from Spain to Switzerland, even places like Japan and Korea got into it. But then, just as it seemed we were reaching peak beard, our politicians' facial hair started to get shorter and smaller. After a while, they'd maybe just have a modest mustache at best. And then by the 1910s, it was increasingly unusual for them to have any facial hair at all. When you look at photos of the various peace summits held after the First World War, it is pretty clear that clean-shaven had become the new norm. Once again, society's tastes had changed, and once again, there wasn't any single reason why. One of the most commonly offered explanations, however, is that the quack naturalism of the Victorian age began to fade as people became more scientifically literate. As people became more educated and started to understand how things like germs and bacteria work, giant messy beards were soon regarded as unclean and disgusting, which I guess is basically how it still is today. Advances in shaving technology, meanwhile, in the form of disposable razors and special creams and things, made being clean-shaven more associated with being modern and sophisticated. This in turn reflected how society was coming around to embrace modernity rather than rebel against it. Pretending to be a wild mountain man didn't seem quite so cool once it became obvious that the Industrial Revolution wasn't going anywhere. Some people will also say that the giant beards began to fade away as society became less sexist and men became a little bit more sensitive to what women wanted, which, as it turns out, was not a 2-foot-long unwashed beard. There is also a popular urban legend about beards falling out of fashion because, like, the gas masks in World War I wouldn't fit over them or something. But fashion historians do not take that one very seriously. This is like that urban legend about how men stopped wearing fedoras because JFK stopped wearing one. Fashion doesn't usually change because of single variables like that. Anyway, now we have shifted so far in the other direction that it is now considered a huge liability for a politician to have any facial hair at all. The story of Thomas Dewey, who ran for president in 1944 and 1948, is often considered like the most dangerous case study in all of this. Dewey, as you can see, had a mustache, and during his 2 failed campaigns, the media was always talking about it and making jokes and stuff. I wouldn't say it overshadowed his campaigns, but it certainly gave him a lot of attention he didn't need. In the end, Dewey summed it up this way:
"Any boy can become president, unless he's got a mustache."
Basically, by the mid-20th century, facial hair had become regarded as just way too risky for any politician to bother with. Political people have done a ton of polls and focus groups on this over the years, and the conventional wisdom is that the public regards men with facial hair as having a whole bunch of negative qualities, like being untrustworthy, secretive, even having backwards views on women's rights. There are, of course, limited exceptions to this rule. It is not that uncommon to see low-level politicians with extremely short, well-groomed beards once in a while. In recent years, there have even been a couple of very modestly bearded men elected as head of state of a couple of countries. And in non-Western countries, particularly countries in the Middle East, beards still enjoy a bit more political credibility than they do here. Though even there, I notice they tend to keep things pretty restrained. Your average Muslim king in the year 2019 still has less facial hair than the Prime Minister of Sweden did 120 years ago. But in general, every time a politician has a beard these days, it will be treated by the media as some big deal, and people will write all of these sarcastic articles about it. And given that politics is ultimately just a game of calculated risk, really, who needs that kind of publicity? But you know who does need some publicity? Today's video sponsor, Loonie Politics. Loonie Politics is a news and commentary website all about Canadian politics, with new content added every day. And with a big national election just around the corner, it has never been a more important time to pay attention to what's going on in Canadian politics. Has Justin Trudeau been weakened beyond repair? Is the public warming to Andrew Scheer? And what's going on with Jagmeet Singh, the man running to be Canada's first bearded prime minister in 120 years? Loonie Politics is a site packed with high-quality columns and analysis from respected Canadian observers from across the political spectrum. It is also a site I myself worked at for many years, so you know they have good taste. Whether you're curious about the SNC-Lavalin scandal, or what Doug Ford is up to in Toronto, or the latest bonkers thing to happen in Quebec, Loonie Politics has the fresh takes you won't find anywhere else. Subscriptions only cost $5 a month, and you can cancel at any time. And if you use the special promo code McCullough, you can save an additional 25%. These days, we seem to expect our politicians to be as aggressively normal as possible. We don't want them to be too flashy or too creative with their personal look, or otherwise break any of our standard ironclad expectations of what a politician should look like, which is apparently some sort of aggressively ultra clean-cut businessman. Unlike the big beard era, we have stopped even judging politicians by the dominant cultural norms of our time. Instead, we have invented this whole other standard in which we expect our leaders to be cleaner, younger, prettier, and vastly more formal all of the time than any citizen ever is. So my question is, have we gone too far? Do you think we'll ever get to the point where someone who looks like this could ever be elected to anything again? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you all next week.